So I have created lots of Elementor tutorials like how you can make it square, how you can create any layouts, or also creating a tutorial which goes from everything in Elementor, which also goes on Flexbox tutorial, but I never created a standalone video. So here we are, and I'll go on the Flexbox containers by top to bottom like this, and I'm going to go very quickly. So just try to keep it up or keep it slow, or just slow down the video, I mean. So simply you could just drag and drop your container like this, and you could see that my container is stretching from left to right. So if I go into my settings, I can select element of full width, because if you choose default, it would use whatever it is selected in your theme. So if you have selected in your theme full width, then it would be no issues, but if you have selected a box layout, then it would not be going from left to right. So that way you could just choose Elementor canvas. So canvas is basically where it would not show the footer and header, or you could choose Elementor full width, which would show the footer and header, and it just replaces the template or whatever your theme is using. Now I do know that if you are using Astra theme, it sometimes not work because they have limited it for the pro version. So it's weird that even for the free version they have not given this option to like use the Elementor, but I'm not completely sure. So test it out if you are using Astra theme, and I also have a video which goes like comparison between OceanWP and Astra theme. So once you have selected full width or default, whichever you're choosing, I can simply just go into my navigator, which is like click on this one and it will open the navigator. In this one I'll just double click and type main, so that we know this is our main container. Inside of this, if I want to add another container, I can just drag and drop it inside of this. Or another way to add is by selecting the main container in the navigator, going into this section and just tapping it once. It will automatically add it, and it works for every single thing. So if you want to add an image, if you want to add a text editor, you could just tap it and it will automatically add it in that container. It's usually helpful because sometimes you're not able to like add it perfectly while dragging. Now in this main container, it is set to 1140 by default. So in the inner container, I'll just make it full width. I'll add some color so that I can show you what we are doing. So let's make it red and then give it some like 200 height, I guess. So right now this container which is inside of this will only be 1140 pixels. But if I want it to be bigger, it would be like, I can just add 1500 pixels and it would be 1500 pixels. And no matter what screen size, it would be like 1500 pixels from the center. So let's say if someone is using widescreen, it would be 1500 pixel in the center, and left and right would be white space, like more white space depending on the screen size. You usually use box layout when you want to create like a design that shouldn't be changing from like the specified space and all. So if you want to create a design which is like accurately like pixel perfect, then you could use box layout. And if you choose full width, it goes from completely left to right, and it would be based on whatever screen size it is. And if I go into this my main container and do 0, because Elementor adds like default 10 padding, if I make this 0, you could see it goes from left to right completely. Now let's select the inner container, and in this I have option of, so before that I'll make it like box layout 1500 pixels, and in the inner container we are choosing 100%. So if this is 100% of our parent container, which is main, then which means our container is 1500 pixels. So if I do 50, it would be half of 1500 pixels. So we can choose percentage, we can choose pixels. So if I just want it to be 200 pixels, I could do it 200 pixels. Usually this is not recommended because when screen sizes are changed, it needs to be responsive. So pixels are usually used if you want to create some design element rather than adding something content related to it. Next is our wave width, and you could see wave width is basically, if I make it 100, it is going to be left to right screen size. So whatever my left to right screen size it will be that size. And because it is starting from this one, it is getting way too bigger. Usually you would not be using this one, so let's ignore that. I also don't use this too. It's usually pixel, percentage, or this pen icon. And this pen icon actually allows you to add your own stuff. Like if I add calculate 50%, so now this is 50%, but I want it to be 50% plus 120 pixels, so I could do that stuff too. And if you want to check how you can use this in a much better way, watch this tutorial in which I go on how you can create one section as full width and one section as boxed. Next thing we are going to check is our minimum height, and you could already see that we have added 200 minimum height, which is this much. we can add VH is basically, if I make it 100, it would be full screen size. So whatever my screen size is, it would be from top to bottom, whatever my screen size is, like this. You could see it's good to create, it's good to use it when you want to have something that is like full section. Just make the main container full width and have it 100 VH, and it would just make it full screen. Next is a pen icon. Again, just use it with any code that you want. I'll keep it 200 pixel for now. Now by default, Elementor uses this layout, which is column vertical. So if I keep duplicating my container, you could say it goes bottom. But let's see, if I change this to, let's say, some another color like blue, I can show you that if we go into row, it goes from left to right. If we go from right to left, we can choose this one. If we wanted to go from bottom to up, we can choose this one. And this is just what it does. And you could have different options for like the responsive settings like this. If you want this to be different size or from top to bottom, you could use it. It usually is useful when you have like an image text around here, but you want like the text to be on top and stuff like this for just mobile version. So let's keep it top to bottom for now. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make my main container full screen so that I can show you what we are doing. By default, we are using justify start. If I make it to center, everything would be in center. If I keep it to end, everything would be at end. Space between does is it checks every widget inside of this, places the first widget on the top and the bottom widget at the end. So whatever I place in between this one, so if I keep duplicating, whatever it is placed inside of this or middle of this would be equally spaced. So the first section would be at the start, last widget would be at the end, and anything in between would be equally spaced. I don't know what space around does, so I never used it. So let's just skip it. And then space evenly does whatever it does, whatever it says, which is like space it evenly. Every element it space it evenly. Next is our align items. Now to align items, I can add a heading. So now you can see it is kind of hard to get like the perfect location to add my heading. So I'll just choose my main container and then choose heading, and it adds it at the bottom. Now you can see the pink border on this heading. It goes from left to right completely. If I go in here, I can make it so that it is aligned at the left side. If I go to the center, you could see the pink border. It is going at the middle and at the end, and by default it uses stretch, you could see. But let's say if you don't want to do it for every single thing, so if I, let's say I have duplicate like this, and if I do this stuff, it does it for every single thing. Maybe you don't want to do that, so you could select the widget and then basically just choose align self in the advanced panel like this. Next is our gap, and it is pretty basic thing, which is like 20 pixel gap between each widget. So anything between this one would be like 20 pixels. So if I make it 0, it is like 0 for the column and rows. And if you want to have like different for, let's say right now row also, these are columns, so columns also have 20 pixels. So if I want to do 20, you could say it is 20 pixels in columns. But if I change this back to column vertical, now for rows there are 0 pixels of distance like this. So you could have your own stuff around here. Now to explain wrap, I have a very nice video which is like creating this bento grid. You could also learn how wrap works, but I'll give you a brief explanation. By default, we use wrap, which is like no wrap. This is what is selected by default. Even though it is not selected, it would be using no wrap. Let's go from left to right like this. And I'll also make everything to be like aligned at the items like this, so that everything is this size only, rather than stretching till end. Now what wrap does is, if I do wrap like this, let's like remove align items. Let's just keep it like this. Let's say if I do wrap like this, it is now 50%, 50%. Let's say if I like duplicate first, okay, if I duplicate this one, you could see this is 100%, this is 100%, and this is also 100%. But still it is able to like have space in here. So what if I make this 50%, and then let's delete this one, and let's add another one which is 50%. Now this is 50%, this is 50%, which is 50% of 1500 pixels, 15% of 1500 pixels, because this is what we have set in our main container. Okay, now if I select wrap, you could see that it is automatically changing it to the next slide like this. And why is that happening? Let's say if I remove my gap, You could see right now it works because the red container is half of 1500 pixels and this one is half of 1500 pixels. So right now both the red container and the blue container have enough space in here to actually fit, so they are actually being in one line. Because if we add like a gap, it is adding 20 extra spacing. So right now there's like 20 extra spacing, and then this blue box is adding, but it is trying to find that if there is enough space in 1500 pixel width. If there is no enough space in 1500 pixel width, it will take it to the next space. So let's say if I reduce this size, you could say it automatically added in the first lane. But if I duplicate this one right now, it take itself to the next lane like this. And why did that happen? Because this one does not have space to fit in here, and that is quite useful when you're creating like some feature sections like 3x3x2 grid. If you want to understand what I mean by that, you should check this video and go to the wrap section. So, and I have added like chapter, and in this video I explain how you could use wrap in a much better way, not better way, but like how you could use like for feature section, so that it is created like much more responsive and better. But basically this container does not have space around here, so it takes it to the next space. Now when you add a wrap, it allows you to have align content option, which is like the same as this stuff. So you could try different stuff like center, start and all. I'll keep it like this for now, but you could do stuff like this: start, center, space between. It's up to it's your choice. Next is our additional option. So let's say for this container, if I go into my additional section and we have overflow option. So if I choose overflow hidden, you can see nothing's happening. But how about I add a heading inside of this one? I go into my margin and I make it go at the left section. You could see that once it goes outside this container, it is not visible. But if I make it to default, you could see right now the heading is still visible outside this container. So if you want something to not be visible outside your container, you could use it to create you could use overflow hidden like this. Next is our HTML tag. I don't usually use anything inside of this except the a link. Now what a link does is it adds a link to this whole container, but there is some warning around here. So what does this warning mean? So what if you add anything inside of this? So let's say if I add a heading, and in that heading I add a link to, let's say, my website like this, it would break it. It would break everything inside of this. It would not work. So what it means is that you should have no link inside of this to make it work, so that this works. Okay, so you could add any heading but don't add any link inside of it. You could add any image but don't add any link inside of this link. If you add button though, if you add button, it doesn't matter if you remove it, it would still break. So make sure you don't add a button. Instead you could just add a heading like this, type like click here, and then give it some padding, and then give it some border background stuff, and it would still look like a button. But make sure you don't add any link inside of this and only add a link here, else it would break the layout. Next thing is our style section. Now style section is very like straightforward. If we choose classic, we can choose our color what we want like this. And if you want to have some global color, so let's say if you want to add a global color, you could add a global color like purple and then create stuff like this. And now if I go here, I have option to add purple color like this. See? And we can simply change it. Now it would not work. But the best part about global color is that you could change multiple colors together by simply going into here and then go into site settings, and that you could change like one purple color, and everywhere you have used this global setting, it would change everywhere that purple color is used, so that you don't have to manually change color in every single one. Next is, let's say if I use this purple, I'll add it in the hover as stuff like this, and then make it, let's say, darker purple. You could see when I hover on it, it changes to different color. And in the hover section, we have option of how fast it needs to be. So if I choose it to 1 second, it would be 1 second like this. If I choose it to, like, say 0.1, it would be very fast. So how fast you want it to change the color. Next is our image. So we can add an image by just clicking on here and choosing an image. So let's say if I choose this image, we can see our image is added. I'll make it center, so where you want it to be. Right now you could see that the image is repeating because it is smaller than this container. But before that, let's just check this one. So if we choose scroll, which is something that is used by default, we can choose it, change it to fixed, and what it does is when I change my scroll, the image is going to be around here. Repeat is basically we don't want it to repeat. You could see right now the color is showing, which we have shown here, and this is like no repeat. If I only wanted to repeat on x-axis, if I only wanted to repeat on the y-axis, so I'll keep it no repeat. And then we have display size. So we have contain, which means that it would force it to contain inside this container. We have cover, which is like commonly used, and it basically like stretches the image so that it covers this container. And then in all of this we have custom options. So in the custom we can choose like our custom distance that we want, and also we could use like this one which is like calculate stuff how you want it to be, like 50% plus 120 pixels, and it would be that distance. Same with display size, you could add like custom display size, and then I can make it, let's say, top right to create like crazy designs. So let's make it default. Let's make it default, except this one. I think I'll make it cover, and also center. Scrolling effect and mouse effect I'm not going to show because this is like available for every single element. It's not just for container. You could go for any widget and go into advanced, you would have that option. So I will not explain that. Now in the image section, you could actually change the image like this, and then it would change that image on hover. So if I add this, you could see that the image changes that to hover like this. Same settings, you could change everything around here. Then we have a video. You could basically copy any URL and then paste it around here, and it will show that video. So you could see it starts playing. You need to select this if you want to have it play on mobile, else it would not play on mobile. You could choose when it should start. So if you want the video to start at 10 seconds, if you want it to end at 70 seconds, if you only want it to play it once. Privacy mode, I don't know what it does. It's something to do with cookies, but I don't understand it. Background fallback, always add it. It basically means that if the video does not load because, let's say, for some reason like it didn't load because of internet speed, or the video just broke, then it would use this image. Next is slideshow. In the slideshow, you could basically select multiple images like this, create new gallery, insert it, and right now it is going to change to the next image every 5 seconds. So let's make it 1 second so that we can check it pretty faster. Then we got multiple effects, so like slide up, slide down, stuff like this. Transition duration, how fast the animation should be from one slide to another. If I make it to 100, it would change like very fast. If I make it to, let's say, 1000, it would be very slow when it changes. This is the same. Background size, background position. Lazy load basically means that the image would only load when you are in the screen. So let's say if this section was like at the bottom, it would not load the images until you have scrolled down to that images, and it is good for website speed. Now we have Ken Burn effect, which is like zoom in, zoom out effect. It usually works well with fade. So like this, you could say it is zooming in, zooming out, or we can choose in and out. Pretty normal stuff. Let's go to our classic. Then we have our background overlay. So right now we have a background in here. I'll remove this one on hover effect and I'll keep it this way. Sometimes you want to add a text on here. So what you could do is you could add a black color on here and then choose opacity, so that when you add a text on your white text, it is easier to read. You could also add an image on here. So let's say if you want to, you could add like an image on top of it so that it creates this weird effect. Every setting is same. There's also like blend options, like different blend options that you could use to add like texture. So if you have a noise texture, you could add noise texture on it and then choose a blend mode. There's CSS filters, which is basically like if you wanted to get blurry, brightness of this section, contrast, saturation, change the color. This is like very basic stuff. I'm not going in CSS filter. And basically if you have some textures, you could create like really cool looking design. Especially like noise texture works well, like this paper texture looks good. Like if I do multiply, you could see how this works. So you could create like cool designs, and same with like gradient. Well, I didn't show gradient, I believe. Yep, I forgot to show you guys gradient. So let me just disable it. Gradient is very simple. We just add like 2 colors. Sometimes let's say if the gradient is not showing, make sure you select like both colors. So then the gradient will show, and then you could choose how you want. So it's 0 to 100 like this, linear, radial. It's very basic stuff like top, center, top, right, where you want the gradient to be. Let's make it linear, and here you could change the what you call angle. And another thing is, if you make this, if you make the second color like 0, you could actually create some sharp lines like this to have like double design. Make this, let's say 0 or 90, and you could do stuff like this. Could make something like translucent and then have an image in the background, and pretty cool stuff that you could do. Same with this one. Now if I add, let's say, black color, you could see that I have option to change the opacity from here. So if I make it 1, it looks like this, and I can use my opacity changing from here too. But the way this comes in handy is, let's say if I make it 0.5 on hover, I'll choose it. It should go 1. So right now you can see when I hover, it changes the opacity to 1, and now it looks like this. So it gives like this cool effect. Everything else is same as the top one. Next is our border. Let's remove this. Okay. Next is our border. If I choose solid, I can add a border of black color, or let's say blue color like this one, and choose how big you want the border to be. There are multiple options, which is like dashed, dotted, dashed, groove, but usually you would be using solid. Border radius is the radius of these edges. So if I make it 25, you could say everything is 25. And the thing about is if you want to have, let's say 5, or let's say make it 0, and I only want a border to be at the right side, so I can make it look like this and have only a border on right and left. Let's keep it this way. And same with border. If you only want border to be at the right corner, at the bottom corner like this, you could make it have specific design that you wish to. Next is box shadow. So for box shadow, I'll just remove this. Also same thing, if you want to have like different stuff on hover. So right now you could see on hover it changes the border, so it will just switch from this state to this state. So let's make it default. Now in the box shadow, we can add a shadow. So if I make it like this, you could see the shadow of that design. Here you can choose how harsh the shadow should be, then the blur radius, and then spread radius. And if you want it to be inset, so inset is basically inside of this container, and outline is outside this container. And you could create very cool looking effect with this ones to give your design much more depth. Now shape dividers. Okay, shape dividers would be easier to explain in a new container, so let's create one. Let's make it like 500. The way shape container works is, if I go into type in the top section, if I choose mountain and add some color, you could see we got our mountain effect like this. Now we can flip it, or we could bring it to the front. So bring it to the front would basically place it on top of in every element. But right now we could choose the width, we could choose the height, and there are so many options that you could choose. And the way it shines is if we have a container on top of it like this, and this one also has the red color. I don't know if it will show this one. Okay, you could see how it works. So let's say if I had some elements inside of this, like text and all, it would look like a really nice transition. And it is same for bottom. So if I want to have another thing at the bottom, I could just add at the bottom too. So you see, pretty easy. Flip and then just choose which one you want. So this is all for the background. Now let's go to the advanced section. Now advanced section is pretty easy to explain. It is like universal stuff. If we want 50% margin, we can add 50% margin, but here it would explain a pretty better way, I guess. If I add 50% margin, you could see I move all the box towards left to right, and it is based on pixel. You could see we have multiple options. But how about let's say make this 0, and this one, if I add 50 padding, now you could see the difference, right? If I add 50 padding, it is adding inside of this stuff. So let's say if I have a text inside of this one, if I add a margin 50, it is moving the whole container. But if I'm adding padding, it is adding the space inside of this container. So know the difference. Padding is added inside of this container, margin is added outside this container. Align self, we have already seen. It would just align it based on its own thing. It's same as our align items, but it only works for like the specific stuff. Also, if you're hearing some weird noises, just ignore that. There's some construction happening. Now for order, it is basically that I want this section, this container, to always be at the start, no matter what position it is. So even if I place it at the end, not inside of this, even if I place this container at the end, it would be at the start. And if you want it to be at the end, I can keep it at the end. And you could add, like, say, custom order if you wish to. I don't know how to use the custom order. I've never used it. I think you have to add like custom order for every single thing by going in here manually and then adding custom order. So this is 1, then this is probably 2. I don't know how this works, but basically if you want it to be at the start, if you want it to be end, no matter the position, you could use that. I never use this one. Next is size grow. Again, if you want to learn about this one, the best video is my bento grid tutorial for this one. Okay, now basically you could see that this container is 30% and this container is 50%. Just ignore the construction noises if you are hearing. Okay, sorry for that. Now this is not 100%, right? 30-50% of 1500 pixel is just taking 80% plus this 20 pixel size. What you could do is you could choose grow, and what it does, it basically stretches it so that it gets into the remaining space. It stretches it to the remaining space. You could add grow to every single element like this, and it will try to grow to the whatever size it is. And you could see that if I make it bigger, it takes it to the next space, but it also stretches it to the end of this because it is trying to stretch completely. You could say it is trying to stretch completely to the next layout. And it is a good way to create like really responsive designs where you don't want to have this weird spacing, which is why I'll just say that you should watch this video. It goes like very detailed in warp and using this grow function. Shrink is basically, I believe, what it uses. I've never used it, so let's just ignore that. Now position absolute, this is also like available for every single thing. Basically, if this element, if I want to add a position absolute, I could use it, and now it does not use any space. Now position absolute is not a container related thing, so I'll just skip it. So just remember that because position absolute, z-index, css id, css classes, this all elements are universal and they are not limited to containers. And you could see everything else are pretty basic stuff. It is available in every single thing. It's not just limited to like containers. So if you want to learn more about this one, this advanced option, I would suggest checking this video. Where is it? Everything Elementor. I go in everything related to Elementor, but these two sections are just for container and this section is for universal. You could see no matter where I go, if I choose this one, it is same for this one. If I go in here, it is same for this one. So yeah, that's all for this video. Everything else you could check it on my other video, which is everything Elementor. And yeah, thanks for watching. And if you wish to get Elementor Pro, if you want to create like cool looking stuff, I have lots of things in Elementor templates, and there are new stuff coming like neuromorphism, like floating icons, and a lot more stuff. So make sure you subscribe so you get notified whenever I update it. And also you could check like my blog section where I explain lots of like new stuff, like this cool looking stuff, and all my videos. So yeah, thanks for watching.